an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Deadwood, Season 1, Episode 1, Deadwood, brought to you by Pat. In this episode, we get introduced to a slew of characters. Please bear with me while I learn their names and sort that out. And I have just never known how much I needed Timothy Olyphant to be in an official Old West setting. I'm very excited. Welcome to Spoil Me. All right, welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Again, many thanks to Patrick for commissioning this episode. He commissioned the first 5, I believe, of Deadwood. So that's always fun because I know that I can go on and watch the next one as soon as I'm done recording on the previous. And I just, had been, so a little bit of background. Those of you who are not aware, I did cover Justified for the podcast with Alan as my co-host. Really enjoyed that show. There were definitely hiccups with it, but most of the time it was just super fun. And there were a lot of people who were suggesting, based on the fact that I enjoyed that I covered Deadwood, which I was game to do. But there were other things that I had sort of already had on my mental docket that were in more demand. So I kept saying that I would cover it, and it's just been pushed back because of these other things that are enormous series. And Pat emailed me and was like, would you be cool with me commissioning that? Because you said once that it was something that you were looking at doing. And I was like, listen, it would be ideal if I could, but I don't know when that's going to happen. Not for years, at the very least. So yeah, go ahead if you want to do that. This seems like a great show to do that for, because it's something that I've been excited about. And despite being excited because I knew a lot of the cast members, I don't know anything about the plot of the show other than it is set in the Old West. That's all I know about it. So I'm coming into this pretty much blind. And I know that it was unceremoniously canceled and that there are a lot of people who are still kind of mad about it. So those are the 2 pieces of information that I have. Old West and canceled too soon. So this episode starts off with, it's like they decide to really zero in. And I'm not exactly sure how much Timothy Olyphant's character is named Seth Bullock. I'm not positive exactly how much of a main character he stays, because this is a big cast with a lot of fairly big names. And so it's the sort of thing where I don't know if they will do the thing where they start off with an actor who's got more of a following to draw people in, and then they do a little bit of a switcheroo because of how many cast members there are. Maybe somebody else's storyline becomes a little bit more intriguing, and the person you thought was the main character turns out to kind of not be. And I don't know why I'm thinking about that. I think it's just more because of, this is obviously some pretty quality writing already, you can tell. And that is something that tends to happen when people are good at writing. They can recognize when one character is more interesting than another, and rather than try and force the issue with one character, they decide that they're going to pursue the path that's already open to them of this one character that started to kind of steal the show. So we'll see if that winds up being the thing. But for now, I'm going to call Seth the main character. And Seth is the marshal for this area, but he's on the tail end of his career. He is about to leave. And I thought about to leave meant in the morning or in a couple of days, but it's 10 minutes after we meet him. And there's this guy who has been locked up, and he was stealing horses. And the guy is talking about this place called Deadwood, which is a camp set up on Indian territory, and they use the word Indian And so I'm going to use the word Indian in my discussion of all of this rather than Native American, because that is the language that they are using in this most of the time. And they are, apparently it's an area that has like no law, is the way that he keeps saying it. And it appears like when we actually finally get to Deadwood, there is a semblance of law, but there's no official sheriff or anything. There's nothing that's like organized. So people take matters into their own hands. So yeah, this guy sort of has this attitude as he's talking about it with Seth that like it's a free for all over there. But it really appears that like it's a free for all in so much as if you can get away with it, but people have their eye on you, and you may not even be guilty, and they will be willing to shoot you down the goddamn street. So, it seems pretty much the same as anywhere, really. And he's also talking about, like, how there's just gold in the rivers that you can scoop up with your bare hands. So you get a little bit of a preview there on exactly what this whole thing is about, that this is a place where people do panning, and it's the gold rush. So he is trying to convince Seth to release him and for the two of them to like bail together and head over to Deadwood, and that he knows somebody who will like give them a jump start, money wise, supply wise, who knows. And Seth is not for a moment even tempted by this proposition. Like there's no moment in his mind where he's like, maybe. He does feel in a lot of ways like his Raylan Givens character. So outside rolls up the dude that the prisoner stole the horses from. And this guy just wants to murder the dude who stole from him. He wants this guy taken out front so that he can shoot him in the head, which like seems pretty intense to me for stealing horses, but okay. And when Seth goes out there, he points out that apparently this dude summoned him to arrest this guy and now wants to like undo that and like be allowed to take care of this however he feels like it. And Seth is like, that is not how this works. That's not how any of this works. No. And I really enjoyed that moment of him just being like, you think you could just like flip a switch and have this be on and off, that it's law when you feel like it and then not? Especially because you clearly just changed your mind because you've been drinking and you got yourself all riled up. And evidently the punishment for stealing these horses is to be hanged. Which, again, yikes. That is just so harsh. But okay. And Seth he gets the prisoner up on a stool, and the prisoner's like, but my sister was coming, and I was supposed to see her. Like, this execution was scheduled, but not so soon. And I just love how this all played out. There, I don't doubt that there are plenty of instances where it could have been played the exact same way by Seth and by the prisoner, and the crowd would have had absolutely no mercy at all. I don't doubt that. But I liked that they chose to go this way with it. So the prisoner gets up. He is, and I'm going to double check here, Clell Watson. That's his name. Clell gets up there and he's like, this isn't enough of a drop. I'm just going to choke for like 20 minutes before I die. And Seth is like, don't worry, I'll help you out with that part. Just get up here. And the guy he stole from is like, don't you dare get up on that stool. And Clell says, why? Or you'll kill me? Which I was like, that he makes a solid point. And apparently the horse owner also thinks he made a solid point, because he doesn't really have a comeback for that at all. He just sort of stands there like, well, yeah. And Seth asks Clell for his last words, and he tells him to tell his sister that he's sorry that he fucked up, to take his boots and give them to his son and tell my son his daddy loved him. And Seth is writing all this down as this man is telling him. And finally, the guy jumps and Seth grabs him around the legs and yanks in order to break his neck. And every man there, because the guy who was ripped off is standing there with a crowd of like 15 dudes, 10 or 15 guys. And they all showed up foaming at the mouth for some justice here. But they see this and they get very sober. And I don't mean, they're all drunk. But it's something about hearing this man's last words, hearing him, he asks for God's forgiveness is like the first thing that he says. Talking about his child and wishing that he would have a chance to like raise his kid, asking his sister to bring him up good. I really love how affected they all clearly are by this. And this man had been, he had been making all kinds of threats if they didn't let him shoot this guy himself. But once they do proceed with hanging, he doesn't kick up a fuss at all. He is almost respectful, like sort of takes a step back and lets it. And then finally, when the man is dead, Seth has the last words written down. And he says, who's going to pass on his last words to his sister? And the man who owned the horses says, none of you step forward, I swear to God. But somebody on his like right hand, I don't know if that is his close friend, his brother or what, finally caves and is like, oh shit, I'll do it. And it's just a really nice moment of acknowledging this criminal as a person. This is a human being, and they all are treating that with gravity. And I thought that was just a really nice moment of humanity from everybody. That's pretty unexpected, it's just, if you had told me that a man gets hanged in front of someone that he stole from, I would have expected it to be a jubilant sort of moment with a lot of cheering and feelings of vindication. And that's not what happens. I'm not sure that anybody's necessarily sorry the guy's dead, but they are at least recognizing that it's a big deal that somebody died. They're not flip about it. So I was just really impressed with the writing of that scene, with how gradually it begins to happen, that everyone starts to sort of settle down from being really frothing for this justice. And it ends with Seth still being aware that the tide could turn back. These guys are still drunk. It's an unpredictable situation. So his buddy Saul, is it Saul or Soul? I think it's Saul, right? He comes riding out on his wagon, excuse me, and Seth hops onto the back of it and hangs on as they pull out with his gun still trained on everybody. I think it's a shotgun. So he knows that they're all being cool now, but it could only be a moment before they're all coming at me again because they're angry. So yeah, I really enjoyed the whole setup here. And it really lets you know who Seth is. Seth is somebody who wants to obey the letter of the law, who believes in justice in a very specific sense. Justice that has followed the procedure that he is comfortable with. And that he is a cautious person who can read people pretty well and understands when to be prudent, for lack of a better word, and when to take a risk. And we know now from that moment that Saul is his buddy, and that he is going to be there to provide backup when Seth needs it. I don't have a good sense from this first episode what Saul is like personality-wise. Don't really know yet. But there is a comment when Saul pulls out with the wagon where somebody says, look, it's a Jew on a wagon. So apparently Saul is Jewish. This is one of those things that that it will be often in like books and TV that people can tell someone is Jewish by looking at them, which I've never really like gotten to understand how that works. I don't know if these dudes know he's Jewish from looking at him, or if they know he's Jewish because of having gotten to know him while he lived in this town. But either way, it's something that may be a problem for him later on, the prejudices that people have. So they ride out, and we cut from there to Deadwood. They haven't arrived there yet. But we get to see what's going on. And it is a free-for-all is probably the best word right now. Al Swearingen. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. Al is the owner of the Gem, which is a saloon, brothel, basically casino. And he is played by a guy that I call, that guy from John Wick. Al Swearingen is one of those characters that I feel like he could go either way for me. Either I could grow to really love him in a, I hate you sort of way, or I could really hate him. I don't know yet where I stand on this. He is a pimp, and the women that work for him all seem like they have been put through the fucking ringer. These poor women, and I mean, this is a very accurate representation in my mind of what it was probably like. These women, when you had to work in this sort of situation, there's so much out there representing, beautiful women who have this sort of like leisurely lifestyle with the occasional, and this is really more what I picture, being worn out, having to be awake through the night, having 5 or 6 different guys in a night because the owner decides to make pussy half price to keep people there. Dudes losing their tempers or coming at you fully intending to hurt you, and having to have your own back. And there is a woman who is disabled, and I can't tell if it was at birth or if something happened to her, because she is helping out a sex worker whose name is, what is her name? It's not Jane, because Jane is the one who swears all the time. Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't find it. But, because I'm trying to look in places where I know I won't be, that I won't be spoiled. But this woman, is being helped by another, and the woman who's helping her and gets a second gun for her has a look to her like she wound up disabled because she was beaten really badly. And I wouldn't be a tad surprised if that's what happened. This is something that is an occupational hazard when you're a sex worker, and there's no safety measures in place and no regulation beyond the fact that the owner wants you to be able to work again the next day. That's as much motivation as he has to keep you safe. And having each other's backs is the only way to make sure that you make it out night after night alive. Especially if you're dealing with guys who have hurt you once and then they come back in the next night. You're going to have to face off with this motherfucker again. You're going to have to be prepared, and you're going to know that this is an issue. So Al is running this place. He has these women. Trixie, that's her name. Trixie shoots a guy because he's beaten the hell out of her. And he really beats, her face is a mess. And apparently what it is that he came in the night before telling her how he like lost all his money. But then when he wakes up, he thinks that she stole it because he doesn't remember that he lost it. And he starts to beat the hell out of her, and she shoots him in the head. It's one of those really like weird details that I don't know if this is going to be significant. I don't think so. But the bullet goes through the front of his brain from like one temple to the other. And yet he's still alive for almost 20 minutes before he finally dies, even though he's been shot through the brain. And Al is not pleased. He told her, apparently there's been issues with her before, having firearms when she is not supposed to. And he pulls her into another room and throws her against the wall and then literally stands on her neck until she agrees to behave. And I would have thought that would scare her enough, but it doesn't. She winds up getting another gun. In the end, she turns the gun in and sort of apologizes. But like, and by apologize, I mean gets naked and gets in bed with him and cuddles up to him in this real creepy sort of scene that's like a nice microcosm of the power dynamic between them, where he is in bed in his pajamas and did not summon her and did not ask for, but she knows that he's aware she has this gun tucked between her breasts in her corset. He saw it and she knows he did. So she just has to decide what she's going to do and how she's going to handle it. And she winds up going up there and crawling into bed with him and laying her head on his chest in this really sort of like submissive gesture. And I was surprised that he seemed to like give her that extra chance, because when he saw the gun, I expected him to just kill her, honestly. And the fact that he didn't, I don't know if that says something about who he is, or if that says something about how he feels about Trixie, if they have like a special relationship. But these women, I just fucking feel for them. Like, they are just putting up with some garbage, and it is really accurate and creepy to hear how they're talked about as if they are not living things. They are just objects, and they're like a piece of his commerce, like a deck of playing cards. You know, it's just really, it's true. It's exactly how I have no doubt things were done in those days. But damn. So Al is a fucking con man. On top of owning this place, he has this like long con that's going with this dude who, so I'm going to get to Wild Bill in a second. Don't get me wrong. But there is this dude who's got a little bit more money. Brom, that's his name. Brom is a prospector with a lot of money and not a lot of brains. Brom is he's one of those guys that thinks because he's from the city and that he was like brought up, educated, and has money, that he knows how shit works, and he does not. And so the first time that we see him, he's getting sort of played, which turns into being a really big play, because he's trying to get a claim, and the original price had been for $14,000, and the con is supposed to stop there and gets him up to $20,000, which it seems like that would be a really like good, what do you call it? Like it feels like getting him to pay $6,000 more than he originally was going to is going to be a good thing, that there's no reason for Al to be upset with him about it. But it's really like interesting to me that Al doesn't appreciate it. And I'm not sure if that's because either A, he had other plans for the remainder of his money, because we find out that pretty much taps Brom out and he's going to have to write home for more money. So I don't know if there was something else that Al was planning on with the rest of that money, or if it's purely because this guy who was doing the con with him, named Tim, I think, just didn't follow his instructions, and that in of itself is disrespectful. I tend to think it's that second thing, but it doesn't have to be just one thing. It could be both. So, in summary, Brum winds up getting cleaned out and paying way more for this claim, and then later on, Al has Tim killed out of anger at him basically not following instructions, and also not really seeming to be sorry that he didn't follow instructions. He isn't repentant. He doesn't understand what he did wrong. So that's what's going on later. And the person who stabs him is named Doherty. And Doherty is basically like Al's right-hand guy. I really like Doherty. He seems like a smart dude with a heart. He has to kill Tim, and he's like not happy about having to do this. He sort of gives it a shot that he defend the guy. And then when it's very quickly made evident that Al has no interest in his opinion on anything, he does it, but he does it with like tears in his eyes. He's just like, man, I didn't fucking want to do this. I don't really think that you deserve this. It's a really like sad moment, to be honest. And does that make him like a good person? No, he still went ahead and fucking killed the guy. Like, don't get me wrong. But I always find it much more interesting when a character is like conflicted and still willing to do bad stuff. It's more interesting to watch, right? You don't want to watch a whole season of somebody refusing to do any of the like mean, dangerous things. That's boring. And Doherty is the guy who gets shit done. And there's a reason that Al constantly calls on him for help, because he's obviously loyal and competent. He's also the one that winds up taking the money from Seth and Saul when they show up, because they wind up renting this like tiny little tented area to start selling their hardware out of. They're selling all kinds of stuff. And they have to earn enough money to pay back this rental, $20 a day, which back then, that's a pretty solid amount of money, like $20 a day, goddamn. And they have to pay that back and save enough up so that they can actually buy a proper like storefront. So he's the one that's in charge of collecting the money and turning it in. And that's a pretty touchy job, you know, like Al must really, really trust Doherty if he is willing to let him handle money with no supervision. That's a big position to have. And he had to have earned that, you know? So obviously they've been working together for a little while. And I also want to like mention the detail that all Al cares about is the welfare of his bar and saloon, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it saloon. All he cares, like, there's a whole thing about like this family that's been slaughtered and everybody wants to ride out and deal with it. And he is so enraged that somebody that works for him was out there circulating the story about it with no thought for the fact that if everybody starts riding out to deal with this slaughtered family, that means they're leaving the bar, which means they're not spending money here, which means that I lose all of that business all night. What the fuck is wrong with you? And he really like loses his temper here. Is this the part? Now, who is it that was talking about it? Is that Tim who was like spreading that around as well? And did that play into it that he winds up wanting him to be killed? Okay, well, nevertheless, let's jump over to Wild Bill Hickok. So, I don't know if Wild Bill Hickok is based on a real person or not. I don't know enough about this, but he is obviously renowned. Everybody knows who he is. Everybody is afraid of him immediately. And he is very obviously somebody to be afraid of. We see him draw, and it is no fucking joke, man. He fast. He real fast. And he has a sidekick, a second in command, named Charlie Utter, and a woman that they call Calamity Jane. Calamity Jane feels like a name that I've heard before, and I don't know if that, again, is based on a real person. But Calamity Jane is hysterical. Like, she is very moody. She swings in and out of good and bad tempers like it's nothing. She respects Wild Bill, for sure. It's not like, but she isn't as completely obsequious as everyone else is. She's willing to fly off the handle in front of him a little bit, too. She will apologize and she'll get it together. But she just swears up a storm. She is obviously very violent. And Wild Bill and Calamity Jane are real people, says Ryan. Okay, cool. Because I thought Calamity Jane sounded real. Wild Bill is just so, like, generic in a lot of ways that I was like, it could be real, it could not. But Calamity Jane feels very specific. And yeah, I really enjoy her whole vibe, that she feels like somebody who's, like, constantly on the edge of losing it and shooting somebody for no good reason at all. Like, I don't know how true that is, but it feels like that. And apparently she does not like Bill Utter, and he doesn't know what he did. He's like, she can't stand him, and she like is very vocal about the fact that she doesn't like him, and he doesn't know what he did. And he's just kind of like, I just wish I knew. I swear to God, what did I ever do to this woman? Which I find delightful. So, and she is also, like, despite the fact that she is violent and in an era like this would be considered kind of masculine, she's still tender-hearted in some ways and is not afraid to really show that. So there's this family that's like going past her, and she like smiles and waves at the little girl. And then when they find that family torn to shreds later, she's the one who's carrying her. They hand her, this little girl, over to her because obviously everyone knows that she had kind of a connection to this little girl, an emotional connection. That the little girl, you even see her look at Jane with this like kind of conspiratorial like smirk between the two of them. And so I like the fact that she isn't just, ironclad. She has some emotional depth to her that maybe informs why she's so volatile. Okay. They are all on the road heading to Deadwood. And it was it was sort of like unclear to me if they were going just to prospect, if they were going just to play cards, combination of the things, or if they just generally travel around and they don't settle anywhere, and this just happens to be another stop on their wandering around, But what winds up happening is Hickok comes to play poker, and apparently him being there draws so many people into the saloon who just want to set eyes on the guy because he's so famous, that Utter is able to negotiate like a fee to have him continually, I think it's like to make it so that it's an exclusive engagement, so that Bill will only ever come into that saloon in order to draw in patrons and keep business up. Which, that's a real thing. That's a real thing even to this day. It's a very real thing. So I enjoy that because it's such it does feel like such a modern idea to have a celebrity appearance in your bar that you pay fees for. But it makes more sense to me when I stop and think about it, that it would have been really, it would be even more important in the days where there aren't constant photos of that celebrity circulating. There aren't, interviews that you can find online. This is a person that people know from like a couple of photographs, probably photographs from wanted signs, and word of mouth. So getting to see them in person would be even more intense, that's kind of a cool idea to me. So yeah, while Bill gets there, there's some guy who had apparently, like, played cards against him and thinks that, like, he basically gets across this sort of, oh, I'm not so impressed with the guy. I don't think he's so great. But I don't understand where that's coming from, because he claims to have played him before and beaten him. And when Bill sits down, Bill basically is like, I think you're misremembering. And sort of like presses him to repeat back to him that he did not, in fact, win against Bill. And my understanding from that moment was that he did indeed win against Bill. And Bill is not going to have anybody tarnish his reputation by talking about the time that he lost. So he's bullying this dude into lying about it. That's what I assume is going on there. But the dude is very, like, free to be like, oh, I'm not that impressed. And then as soon as he's faced with actually talking to Wild Bill and the very gentle, threatening nudge that Bill presses on him, he collapses immediately and is like, whatever you say, sir. So this, like, the actor that they have cast to play him, Wild Bill, is real, real good. Like, he just is really threatening and sinister without having to do much of anything. And let me tell you, if a man can come across as threatening and sinister while wearing that fucking wig, that is a goddamn accomplishment, because that shit is crazy looking. That is some bad hair, my friends. It is awful. It's shoulder length, like curly, wavy, gray hair that's like, I'm thinking borderline mullet. He's wearing a hat, so you really can't tell what the rest of his head looks like. But it ain't good. And if he manages to be as imposing as he does and have the presence that he does despite looking that way, that is a serious bit of respect that he has gained from me. So I just had to mention that, because damn, his hair is terrible. And you know, he is the most distinctive looking character probably out of everybody. So there is that as well, to the element of him being somebody that a lot of people have only seen in photographs. You know, the photos in that era weren't great. There are still going to be people who you're not sure, I think that's them, but he's not somebody that you're going to mistake. You know who that is when you see him. I'm trying to find the moment. Oh, right. Okay. So we have the setting up of a hardware store tent, with Seth and Saul. And there is this really adorable pastor who manages to be a total square and really, like, amiable without being incredibly frustrating or annoying. He is just adorable. That's the word for him. He wants to have friends. He's clearly a little bit lonely, which you would be in a place like this. Nobody gives a shit, you know, like, and he is gonna watch their stuff for them so that they can, both of them, go and explore the town or go to a bar and have a drink or have dinner without having to worry that their place is going to be looted. And it would be very easy to be like, well, this guy is obviously going to loot them. But he's been there for a little while and has apparently done this for other people. So they know that he is at least as trustworthy as they can expect from somebody in this area. And he's planning on sticking around for a while, it seems like. So he wants to keep up the good relationships with all of these different people. So Seth and Saul are wandering around town, checking out the place, and they run into this guy who says that he saw a family get basically chopped to pieces by a bunch of Indians. And it's a real weird thing. Like, the way he starts off talking about it, he just blurts it out to Seth with no preamble. There's no good reason for him to come and tell Seth versus anybody else. And this isn't a critique on the writing. This is a critique on this guy not knowing how to handle the plan that he has created for himself. If he were going into a bar and he like ordered a drink and told somebody next to him at the bar, oh my God, I need this drink. You can't believe what I just saw. That'd be one thing. But they're out on the street and he's just like kind of comes careening in and is just sort of talking to whoever can hear him about what he saw. It's very suspicious and weird. So, you know, Saul is like, well, but I wanted to go to this bar. But Seth is like, listen, there is something weird going on going on with this. I don't understand why he's telling, like, and the way that when I'm asking him questions, he's sort of dodging it. And when he asks, if there were possibly any survivors, he's real cagey about it. The Reverend overhears and comes out and is like, well, the family that you're talking about, there were 3 kids. And he's like, well, you know, it was hard to tell because they were all so chopped up. Like, he really just doesn't have a straight story here. So because Seth makes this guy tell the story to other people, and sort of as a test, I think, to see how the man handles other questions and to see if he recounts it in the same way that he did the first time. And Wild Bill overhears at this point and has the same reaction that Seth does, where he's just like, something about this does not add up at all. Like, I don't buy this for a second. And this is when Al hears everybody talking about how they're about to ride out and gets like really angry. Free liquor, free round of liquor. Pussy is half price for the next 15 minutes, which, like, these poor women, I swear to God. And then we have Wild Bill and Seth and Saul, and there's one other person with them, I think, isn't there? Oh, you know what? It's Jane winds up like coming after them and catching up with them later. But they find the family that had been heading to Minnesota, the little girl that Jane had smiled and waved at, and she is still alive, but the rest of the family is dead. And there's still a lot of stuff left as well. And the whole thing is, this guy said that it was Indians that came and that they were trying to take things, you know, like, but there are too many, like, necessary items, things that you could, that are still totally usable. A lot of food, things like this, that were just left behind. And Seth is of the opinion that whoever killed these people, they were after money. That's all they wanted. That they took their money and left all the other stuff. And that it was obviously staged, the whole thing. And when they go back to town, with Jane carrying this little girl that the doctor is going to try and, like, keep alive, there's a really nice tense standoff in the street where Wild Bill and Seth are on the same side, and this one dude who we find out his name is Mason is up on his horse and arguing about how, well, why would I come to town if I had stolen all that from them, and if I had killed them? I would have just taken off. And Wild Bill says something like, you just got done killing a bunch of people and robbing them, and you wanted to spend some of that money, and you wanted to get some pussy because you were hyped up from it. That's what happens. Like, I've been there. I know. Trust me, my friend. And this guy is continuing to try and argue. Seth is like, you better get down off your fucking horse or I'm just going to shoot you up there. Like, I don't know what to tell you, buddy, but this is going to happen. And Wild Bill comes and stands next to him, and the guy starts to draw on the two of them, and it's no contest. Bill is way faster. Way faster. I wasn't sure how the show was going to play it, if they were going to be like, yeah, well, he's the famous one, but really he's not that fast, but he earned that reputation. And I really like that when the guy goes down, Bill turns to Seth and is like, so did you get him or did I get him? And Seth, with no like resentment whatsoever, says, oh, my money would be on you, which yes, most definitely. And it was very satisfying because it was like I said, the way that this man presented the story was real weird. He is obviously really keyed up when he gets into town in a way that doesn't feel consistent with fear. That wasn't a kind of keyed up that you get when you're flipped out. That was a keyed up of like being invigorated, you know? And I enjoy very much the fact that Seth and Wild Bill wound up on the same side of things here without having to talk about it, really. You know, they have a brief moment of commiseration that this guy's story doesn't make sense. But there's not like oh, hey, friend, you know, like there's none of this bullshit. They just both can tell this guy's full of shit and they're both gonna handle it. And I wonder, because Wild Bill is obviously a criminal and a murderer. If you had gone with the impression that I got from Seth at the very beginning of the show as a marshal, I wouldn't think the two of them would like get along. But we have Seth here ready to shoot down a man in the middle of the street based on like, you know, pretty much circumstantial evidence. I think it makes total sense, and I have no doubt that he's right. But nevertheless, he doesn't have like solid proof of this, really. And he's still willing to just kill the guy. And there's no trial. There's no hanging. There's just a gun. And he's still going to do it. So, you know, my understanding of what Seth's idea of justice is has to be adjusted here. A justice. And it becomes very obvious that working outside of the law is okay with him. He doesn't mind doing that. Not even a little. It's just he is going to do things differently than most criminals as well. So it'll be interesting to see that unfold, how he handles other situations, to see if him and Wild Bill wind up becoming kind of buddies. I would be very interested to see. There's just a lot about the way they interact that feels like they have a similar ethos, I feel like, you know? But I don't think that they are really completely on the same page either. And obviously Wild Bill, like, he had been a lawman at one time, right? So there's that aspect too of like, could Seth go down that road and become somebody like this who's an outlaw now? Like, and he's just trying to earn an honest living, so far as we know, with doing his hardware store. So it's not like he's just going in and gambling and bullying people into pretending that he won when he didn't. I'm just really curious how that's all going to turn out. So let's see. And we have, and Al also, I did want to mention, I'm not sure what his interpretation is on these two either. He doesn't seem totally thrilled about Wild Bill when he initially shows up, which did surprise me because we find out pretty quickly Wild Bill is good for business. You know, like him being there, you do have to pay for him to be there, but nevertheless, it gets in enough people that it more than breaks even. So I don't know if there is some other piece of Bill's backstory that we haven't heard yet that could maybe lead somebody like Al to be trepidatious. Like, did he shoot up a fucking saloon full of people one time? Did something happen where, like, you know, the owner of the previous saloon that he frequented wound up dead? You know, who knows? Did he rob The owner, I don't know. For right now, things seem to be working out. And I also wanted to mention that Al doesn't want anybody to know that Trixie killed a man, understandably. I don't know what kind of family the guy had that was beating her and wound up dead, but it doesn't seem like anybody is coming to look for him. So Al instructs Doherty, that's his name, right? Instructs him to get rid of the body, and he has the doc as well help him out. And they dump the guy into a pig pen, and the pigs eat the body. Which, can I just have a little aside here about how weird pigs are? Like, I love pigs because they are so goofy and so, like, used as an analogous, an animal to just get quickly across that you are fat and a glutton. But also pigs can be really fucking scary because they'll eat human flesh and love it. If they are wild in the woods, they could kill you. No problem. And they're also really fucking smart. Like, smart as dogs. Easy. And I know that because they're so smart, a lot of people are like, well, we shouldn't be eating them. They're too intelligent. In my mind, they'll eat us. Pfft, whatever. Go ahead. They would eat us if they got a chance to do it. They wouldn't care. It's fine. So, yeah, I'll eat a pig. Whatever. But watching them dump this body and how fucking thrilled the pigs are, all squealing and come running up because they know, because apparently these guys get rid of bodies that quick all the time. This is their thing. I was just like kind of nauseated. It was pretty nasty. And also I do want to say how much I enjoy that Trixie shot him, because good. Fuck that guy. And it is a bummer that she winds up having to kind of cozy up with Al at the end of the thing, but she has to have him on her side to be safe. You know, like, that's the fucking awful thing about being somebody who is oppressed and abused, is that the people who are doing that to you are often the people who can have sway over whether you live or die. So you have to kiss their ass. You know, it's just, ugh, the whole thing is just so awful to watch. And I would like to see more of what's going on between her and that woman. The one that I was theorizing that maybe she was disabled because somebody had beat her so bad. Because I honestly just want to see more about the sex workers overall, because I'm really curious what all kind of sisterhood they have, how much they look out for each other versus how much there is, like, if there is bickering or infighting among them. Because when you are trying to survive and there is one person in charge, I could really understand people sort of backbiting each other to become that guy's favorite, you know? Or if there are any of them that like what are their backstories? Did they come here intending to do this? Were they sex workers when they arrived? Did they come here intending to become sex workers? Were they here with men who died and then they wound up having to do something to survive? What were their plans? Were they coming to prospect and realized that, like, being a woman prospector out here was really dangerous and that they couldn't do that? Like, I just really want to know more about what's going on with them and how Al got set up on this whole thing. How old is Deadwood as a camp town? It doesn't sound like it's real old at all. You know, there's a lot of temporary housing here, a lot of tents. There are some actual buildings, but and what is the law around this? Because they're on Indian territory. Is this an illegal settlement? Like, I'm not sure how the laws worked back then, you know? And of course, it's not like Indians had rights that were protected by anybody with actual power. So whether or not it's illegal probably doesn't even fucking matter. It doesn't factor into what they are allowed to do. But I'm also very eager to see some Native Americans and the way that they're handling this situation and the kind of retribution that they might try and take, because it's real hard to like listen to this guy try and pawn off the murder that he committed onto them. And also, everybody yelling about like these godless savages, these, you know, it's, again, is it accurate? Sure, totally. But it's also infuriating. So that is another thing that I would like to see a little bit more of, is like a little bit more of the history of some of the people who are here and how this place was built and set up and what the politics surrounding it are. The logistics. That's just, you know. Yeah, so I think that's everything. I'm trying to think if there was anything else about this episode that I wanted to mention. But I think that I pretty much that I went over everything. Yeah. So I'm delighted. And this is a pretty long episode, I felt like, right? I didn't check to see like what the runtime is. 62 minutes. Okay. So it was just over an hour. It felt longer than that because they packed a lot in. There were so many people that I was meeting, and there were so many different plot threads being brought together, but I feel like they did it really well. It kept moving, and I am engaged with, there's no character yet, and I say yet cautiously, that I feel like, oh God, who cares about this guy? Go back to the other one. I'm equally interested right now in everybody. So we'll see if there's anybody that I start to be irritated about. But, you know, so far so good. So I want to say thank you again to Pat for commissioning this. This is a lot of fun. I'm very excited about continuing to cover this. The next live one is going to be on Monday. Today is the 22nd. So tomorrow, it's a week from today, which is like the 30th, I think, the 29th. So, yeah, it seems like he has booked them pretty much a week apart. And if you would like to hang out with me and talk me through people's names if I forget stuff or ask me questions, it seems like pretty much every Tuesday he's booked out over the next month, essentially, at 11 a.m. So 11 a.m. Central Time Tuesdays. Be there or be square. And thank you guys, all of you who came. Thank you, Ryan, for chiming in there. And I will see you all soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.